Okay, Renata, I think we are on air. We're broadcasting.
Good. Do we have Noemie with us?
Not yet. She's joining us.
Noemie got held up, but I wanted to get started and see who's joining in with us and welcome them to ask any questions. So basically this is it's meant to be a discussion that will trigger some thoughts and allow us to get some of the insights of Noemie Lafrance, who is a Grammy-nominated choreographer and two-time Bessie Award-winning choreographer. And she is coming from a background in site-specific work and as a choreographer. And she is pioneering very beautiful dance film works. And she has been our guest mentor now for 1 year at a workshop called Experimental Film Virginia. She's returning this year in 2014 to join us again for Experimental Film Virginia. So this panel is meant two things: to get people informed and excited about this workshop that we're offering, as well as be a general and productive discussion for people about dance film, specifically from Noemie's point of view. So this is our intention. We have some questions that we'd like to help trigger some conversation with Noemie, looking at location, the way she uses location in her filmmaking. What is it about a choreographer and this point of view of a trained moving dancing body? What does that bring to the film world? And how we use sound to bring out the kinesthetic relationship we have to the screen. And also pedagogically, what does it mean to teach dance film? And why is it useful and productive for artists, especially those who are very experienced and in the professional world, to attend a workshop of this nature, and what they can walk away from. So this is on our agenda, and as soon as Noemie is here, we will get started in getting her to share her thoughts. She's extremely eloquent and well-spoken, and really surprised me, actually, at how well she was able to teach and bring out some gumption and directness with her students that she worked with last summer. So I can't wait to see what she does this summer. And we have some very high-level artists coming this summer, as well as very beautiful professional dancers. So I've got high expectations. But yeah, is Noemie, is she here?
Not yet. She's experiencing some issues, but if you want to start presenting probably the workshop, I'm trying to help her so that she can join us. Okay?
Okay, well, I will present the workshop in a way that I think is productive for people who are also not planning on attending, because although this is meant to give some idea of what our workshop is about, it's not meant to be just publicity for our workshop. I'd like to open it as a discussion also about what and why do we do workshops for dance film. So I have a message here from someone. Okay, here you can call. Are you taking care of that? Is that Noemie? Okay. So basically, in a nutshell, the workshop we're offering is 2 weeks, which is a really long time, very intensive. And what's really valuable about that is that you have time to first have a couple of days of being in the place, scouting locations, having screenings and discussion with Noemie, and time to just get yourself settled and stirring up some ideas based on what Noemie is discussing and bringing up in her lectures. We also have some special guests, and I think that's also really important in a workshop setting, is to have more than one voice. So while we have somebody like Noemie as our guest mentor, we have Paolo there as a sound design expert. I'm there as a sort of facilitator, director, outside kind of person helping direct and keep things cohesive. We have Aaron Harvey come, who's a cinematographer for National Geographic, and we have Chris Roll, who runs a professional production company. So we have a really powerful team of people who are highly specialized, and I think that makes a big difference. I recently went to a workshop hosted by the European Video Dance Heritage, and they had several mentors who worked one-on-one with smaller groups. And I think this mentor relationship really does work. And an important thing that Noémie does is have a one-on-one session with each person, and she looks at their past work and says, here's what I see, and here's where I want to push you to go. And that's a really important thing for people to have time to reflect on the work they've made and to really think about how they want to push themselves, and not just kind of spontaneously react and be like, let me make a film, and do the first thing that you see because you're, you know, rushed for resources and time. We always want more time, but yeah, we spend one full day doing a research day in which everyone produces a 1-minute basically pitch. So they go to a location that they're 95% sure is the location they want to work on and in. They're given a dancer. It's not necessarily their dancer they will work with, but they have a body to work with in the space. And they basically pitch an idea. The next morning we have this pitch session where you say, here's my 1-minute film, and you put together some quick, very, very rough shots, but it gives us a feeling. You give us your idea, you say what you're going for, what your goals are, and it's really, really good because you're forced to publicly present. You have to have something put together, and many times, as I'm sure most of you know, as you say something and explain it to someone, you understand it in a new way, and maybe even clarify some things for yourself. So that's a really nice kind of progression during the first 5 days of the workshop, from discussions and one-on-one sessions and reflection on where you've been and where you want to go, chance to be on location, experiment, and then a chance to pitch an idea, not only to Noémie, but to the whole group, and kind of put yourself in that position to really get it out there. So that's a really nice first week. From there, we do our casting and give each director also a producer. And if they're interested in working with a choreographer, they have a choreographer to work with, as well as 2 dancers, 1 or 2 dancers. So it's a very intimate and small work team, but everyone has a producer. Each filmmaker is the director and or choreographer, depending on their needs of their own film. So everybody realizes their own project with the support of a production team, essentially. Cameraman, and you know, we've got some boom, what are those called, Paolo? Booms, right?
Sorry,
Boom
trying to
mics.
solve this.
We have the some really nice sound recording equipment so that you can get some on-location sounds, and yeah, 4 intensive days of shooting and rehearsals, then 2 days of post-production. So after day 1, a rough draft that we share with the group. And again, it's really nice to have that moment where you see it up on the big screen and you have to let yourself viscerally respond to what you're making. And then the next day you kind of go in and make that final edit, the final touches, looking at sound. We really, really want people to think about sound, how they use sound in their dance films. And then we have a final screening on the last day, which I think most workshops do have. And I think that's a really, really important thing, to give everyone a goal, even if it's not the final product, even if they will continue editing, to have a showing. And you know, we happen to do it at our beautiful historic theater, and make it a kind of red carpet affair, which is really fun, part of this bigger festival called Harbor for the Arts. And there's Noémie. That's perfect timing. Hi, Noémie.
Hi, sorry. That was
okay.
a little... Peter had to go to a doctor's appointment, and so I had to bring Ulysses in to school. Sorry about that.
Personal life meets professional life.
Yeah, like pretty much every day.
Well, I just got finished introducing you, and I also gave a layout of the workshop.
Okay.
So that people would know. I mean, the idea of this is to give everyone a chance to kind of meet you and have you share some of your thoughts about
Wait,
dance
there's
film.
other people there?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that. Okay. Sorry, I thought we were meeting the three of us.
Well, no, it's something that so it's like a Google Hangout. It's very informal.
Ah, okay, but who else is
people,
there?
well, people can log in and listen if they want, and then they can send in questions, and it's a way for people to get to know you and the work and that way.
Oh, okay.
So we're kind
I
of
think
like
I took a shower this morning.
Oh, you look beautiful.
Okay. All right.
But we
No,
have a
it's so
beautiful
so
chat, so if
which is
people...
that's the only reason why I gave this sort of, contextualized introduction so people would know,
Okay.
whoever's listening in and however this is used, it's really just for us as a way to kind of, brainstorm and process and build our connection and then think about the workshop and kind of, it's a very informal thing, so don't think it's not like anything.
But is there someone in the room where you are? No.
No.
We have a group of people online, and they
Okay.
can communicate with us through a chat. So if they have any question, they can ask us.
Ah, okay, great. So we're doing a radio show.
Yeah, almost video show.
And it's actually really cool because I'm in Seoul and it's 10 p.m. now at night, and Paolo, you're in Italy, and in what time is it there?
It's 20 to 4 p.m.
And Noémie, you are in New York, and it's almost 10 a.m.
It's 9:40.
So so we are spanning the entire all the
Planet.
times.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Wait. Let me just get my tea and I'll be right back.
So
So
I
you
can
think-
see Noémie's in her very beautiful loft studio there in Brooklyn.
Wow.
Okay.
She has her tea.
We all want to see your studio, Noemie.
Oh yeah.
Next time episode.
Here. Can you see?
Yeah, lovely.
And you can read the titles of all my anarchist books.
Actually, I will share with everyone, and Noémie recommended that I read this book, and here it is. It was one of the few I chose to bring with me to Seoul. The Spell of the Sensuous by David Abram. So there's something for people to write down.
Yeah.
Reading list from Noémie.
Okay, so what? Let me just move the so that we have a better.
There we
Okay.
go.
Okay.
So I would love to have, if people ask some questions, Paolo, can you just be in charge of, piping up with so we answer them pretty immediately when they send them in?
I
That
will.
way people are free to jump in and ask a question, and then they're free to come and go as they please, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But I did just want to open the discussion with asking Noémie about, so she's coming to dance film from a background as a choreographer, and especially someone with an interest in site-specific dance and creation. And so I'm wanting to know about her take on this idea of why a choreographer, and how does the idea of being a choreographer and somebody who composes the body in time and space, how does that intersect with location, and how does that intersect with film, the screen, and how does the three of those things then relate? So the body as a performer and the choreographer, and location and the screen.
You're asking everything.
Well, I guess specifically, what is it about the choreographer's lens?
Okay. To make into film.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, because you're coming from a background in site-specific work, maybe what was that journey like for you? Was it first site-specific work and then film, or were you always interested in both? And how as a choreographer did you arrive here?
Well, I guess I could maybe take one entry point into that question is to talk about documentation, because I think that one of the things that did lead me to make films is the inability to document dance. And it wasn't so much that I was interested in documentation as much as it was necessary for, you know, grants and all kinds of things that the world needs from artists so that they can show their work in other contexts and so on. So, and get funding and I think dance has always been one, I mean, probably the most questionable form in terms of its documentation. Perhaps also what we call performance art would fit in that category, but they've developed a really different practice. I think a lot of the performance art that comes from the visual art deals with documentation sometimes as part of their own process. But the thing that really bothered me, well, on the one hand, when I first started making work under Sense Production, I didn't want to document anything. I wanted people to just come and see the show, and if they didn't see it, then they couldn't have that experience, and that's it. And that makes me think a little bit of how Tino Segal approaches his work now, and it also makes me think about some of the things that Robert Irwin said when he didn't want his work to be photographed. And he actually had written a letter to Art Forum saying that he was refusing to have his work represented in a photograph in their magazine. And because he felt that his work was so much about perception and about space that he needed to be present. The audience needed to experience the work, and that his paintings were never finite in just the painting itself, and they would always be changed if they were photographed. And I think we all agree that things change when they get documented, but to what extent do they change, and how do we want to change them, and who is in control of how they change is an interesting question from, I think, the perspective of the artist. So when I realized that I couldn't get away with, in a sense, not documenting my work if I wanted to get grants and function within that system, I decided, and this was with the first piece that I did, Descent in a Stairwell, I decided to film it myself and make a film of it that would be a work in and of itself. And oftentimes it's interesting because the foundations, they will ask you for a film that is the entirety of the piece, filmed from one point of view, and they want to see the whole thing, and they want to be able to scan through it. But this is really the antithesis of how I perceive my work to be viewed on video. First of all, that implies that they're going to be fast-forwarding through, so they're going to actually choose which segment they look at. Or you can sometimes, say which segment, but the camera from this really distant point of view, just one angle, is also very different from how my work is being experienced, because it's usually all surround, and you're in a space that is completely three-dimensional, and you have choices as an audience member to what you want to look at. So all of these things made it more interesting from my perspective to do something that didn't want to pretend like it was a neutral point of view, but that was a very subjective point of view, that exactly what I felt the piece could feel if experienced through film. So that's an idea that I'm putting out there. Maybe there's some response to that.
Yeah, if anybody has a response to that or questions triggered by that, please write in and we'll jump on them right away. So, And so before this point, so location and this idea of making work in, the non-proscenium environment was always something that was of interest to you. That was kind of a given.
Yeah, I would say that's another aspect, but I think that for me, context is a very important thing, and I think that what a lot of people forget is that context defines content in many ways, or form, or like the container is also part of the object. If you have a little jar of facial cream, the jar and the cream are together, and the cream cannot be without the jar because the jar holds the cream there, and it's the jar is part of its identity. It has its logo on it. There's so many different aspects of it that make them part of it, but we tend to think that all we're really needing is the cream inside, and then we're going to throw away that container like it didn't exist, right? It was just there, but it didn't exist. And so I think that that's a perspective that we tend to have about a lot of things. And there are a few artists, I feel, that are really bringing attention to context in the way that they were. And you could say, I mean, that's maybe not fair to say, but you could say that there are artists that have made it their research to look at context and to go beyond. If you think of painting and how contemporary art evolved, the limits of the painting was always somewhat of an illusion. There's the wall behind it, and does the painting continue onto the wall, and whose wall, and what color is the wall, and all these kinds of things affect how you perceive the painting. So for me, the context of the theater has a lot of preconceived ideas within it that are not necessarily my choice, and that are also very controlled environments that make it so that you can isolate your research or your process, which for me is a very scientific way of thinking, and I am more synthetic. I think that's how you say. Like interested in synthesis, like the entire thing. I'm interested in thinking cosmologically, not just planet size, global, but cosmologically. So I think that we're affected by so many things constantly. According to quantum physics, we are having conversations with atoms and particles that are light years away from us right now. So to define the expression of dance within the frame of this black box for me is extremely limited, not just in terms of space and in terms of aesthetics and visual, but also historically it also creates a relation, a dynamic that belongs to theater and that belongs to a whole line of thinking that defines what art is. So in that sense, I don't feel that for me the theater satisfies the place that I see art has in the world.
That's interesting. Have you ever made a theater work? When was the last time you actually made theater?
I did when I was in school, and it was interesting because I think that my process was already starting to develop in this direction. For example, I made a piece that at the end the dancers, well, we had taken out all of the curtains and everything, so the stage was bare. This was a very European trendy thing to do, but it was still trying to explore, what can we strip down and take out from what makes it a theater. But then at the end, the performers ended up going to sit in the audience, and that was kind of the statement of you know, it doesn't end here at this line. You know, it continues out there. We're part of you. You're part of us. And that's a, you know, it was a political statement in a way. It's wanting to you know, break that fourth wall, or you know, not accept that divide. It's saying we're together, we're not higher than you, or you know, we're on the same in the same space.
So was that
So,
undergrad?
huh?
Was that undergrad?
That was high school.
Wow. So wait, just
Yeah,
where were you then in high school? Were you already in the States, or were you still in Canada?
I was in Canada. I was at this high school called De La Salle, which is an art school. So I did a dance program there and a theater program also. And I did create a lot of choreography. And we actually did what my teacher called environmental dance. And we would do these choreography throughout the school. And I thought that was just so cool. I really liked it. You know, so I think that it, and I liked it also because it would challenge the audience in a way that we had the reputation that we were the modern dance people, the people that throw themselves on the floor and do weird things, and do weird movement. And I always thought, why is it that people don't really seem to get it? They really put it down, or they really don't. I mean, it was naive for me to think that probably, but I was thinking it honestly. I was thinking, why are people just not interested in dance? It's bizarre, and they think it's really weird. They're really estranged by it. And I wanted to connect more and find a language where the, you know, the mainstream of my school was gonna connect to dance and be able to appreciate it somehow. So that was, and that's been a long research of mine also, of always negotiating the elite versus the social and the mainstream, because they're all, for me, eventually connected. And you can't just, again, it's a political perception, you know, that we can exist in the elite, and then we can have these ideas in the elite, but are they relevant to the rest
Yeah.
of the world? I mean, they might not be.
That's yeah. Well, I mean, and that's something that I admire a lot about your work, is that you maintain your artistic integrity and what things that you're really interested in, but you've also found a home in the commercial world. And I suppose
Yeah.
that this is part of that conversation, right?
Yeah, it is, I think, and I think it's probably part of a certain flexibility that I have to be able to exist in these different worlds comfortably. Maybe not totally, though. I think I don't exist totally in the elite, intellectual, left, you know, all these different kinds of worlds that I'm interested in. I think I don't exist entirely either in this commercial world. I think that I'm always a bit uh, of a stranger, or a foreigner. I'm a foreigner, you know. I've been living in not my country for 20 years. So that's half my life. So I lived in my own country for 20 years, but that, you know, that's also a context, you know, that to have not been in your own country, not living in your own language. Though I don't believe in countries, I think that it still is, you know, culturally has an impact on
What
how
do
you
you mean?
understand things.
What do you mean by you don't believe in countries?
Oh, well, I mean, I think that I think we would be better off if we didn't have countries, and if we didn't have these imaginary borders that separates us. But this is another very complicated conversation we shouldn't get
I
into.
know. Well, I always am not sure where to push, because actually you have such interesting. I mean, you've already said that for you it's about the whole picture. It's about, you know, a universal picture. It's about the universe, not a planet. So
Right.
I mean, it's very interesting to hear you talk about your philosophy on life, and you know, even the things that interested you when you were in high school, and to see then how that's shaped who you are today. Because I know there's many you know, young dance filmmakers or filmmakers who are curious about dance film, what is it, or dancers who are thinking maybe I want to get into film, you know, especially dancers who are choreographers who are used to being able to perform and do things themselves, and maybe they turn to dance film as a way to stay involved and still choreograph without having to be so physical, because the process can be a little bit more less physical once removed. You can maybe, a lot of dancers come to it when they get injured, for example.
I wasn't thinking of that. Right. Well, you mean because they would dance less and be behind the camera, you mean?
Yeah, because it becomes another, you know, it becomes another way for you to be a moving body, and you know, whether even
Right.
if it's behind the computer and being the editor, and just
Yeah,
kind of
dealing with movement.
dealing with movement, exactly. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's many different ways to arrive in dance film, and kind of thinking about this kind of diverse, especially with our workshop, and what I would love to see more of happening in the dance film world is much more interdisciplinary. I mean, dance film is already so ripe for that, because it already is where the world of cinema meets dance and movement. And I know I actually would love to ask you also to talk about this difference and the reason why there's this sort of tension, you know, an intersection of, you know, the unionized and kind of supported cinema world versus the dance world that has less structure, and how the two of them meet. That's something I want to make sure that because I know you have some very interesting thoughts about that too. But I guess.
Yeah, I mean the dance world is certainly what I call impoverished. It has no money, and which means, that it has no resources, that it's small, and it also, on the one side, you have money and resources that are coming in that you need, but there's also value, and sometimes there are things that don't um, attract money, but that exist, within a different realm of value. But the problem is that dance also, to some extent, within the larger mainstream context, has no value. But it has value. Obviously, we understand that we, as practitioner of dance and people who are involved in dance, we understand its value. But this value is not, they don't exist in the same way out there. And I think that becomes a whole can of worm that is very problematic, because there is not really so much possibility there's not so much possibility for mobility for dance. You can say it like that. Just like when you talk about economic mobility and you talk about someone who's poor who can't move up the ladder because they're in this kind of poverty that is a vicious circle already. And it's the same thing that happens with dance. And it's not to feel bad about ourselves or about it, but it's something to observe, because it's a vicious circle. Like, there's no audience, and then there's no money, and there's no impact, and then there's no value, and so it all circulates together and stays in this. Did Renata disappear, or just switching? Okay.
I think it just switched.
Oh, okay, cool. No worries. So and then the world of film is very different. It doesn't have, film doesn't have, let's say, the status of literature or knowledge, or the kind of science, but it does have a much higher status, and is respected in its kind of value differently than dance. and it has more money, and it also, because it operates, I think, in a very fast timeline, and it needs to be very productive. It's very army-like, you know. It's very hierarchical and structural, and everybody in their ranks, and everybody does their job and not the job of the other. It's collaborative, though, and that's the thing that is very similar to dance, is that you can't make a film alone. And, I mean, you can make dance alone, but a lot of the processes are collective, and they exist in group work. Whereas writing, for example, is much less of a collaborative process, or visual arts usually, you know, making objects is less collaborative. So I think that dance and film have in common that they're both very collaborative structures, even though film is more hierarchical than dance is. Dance is a lot more lateral and a lot more equalitarian. And then they have movement in common also. But this is what's interesting, is when you put them together, then you have movement on top of movement. And that's a lot of movement. In the sense that you need your movement to be against maybe stillness or against something that isn't movement. So when you have movement on top of movement, the movement can get lost in the movement. And I think that the discipline of making dance film has a lot to do with that. Because film moves with camera through space, you could say, and it moves through editing through time. So it has already rhythm and motion, and then the subjects are moving within the film also. So framing is moving, objects are moving, and then you have the timeline, the cutting, which is another layer of movement, more rhythmical. And then if you add the subject moving really intentionally within these frames that are also moving, we need to create some kind of order there so that we can focus.
So is this, I know that I remember last summer you would encourage people, and it kind of became our joke of like, don't dance.
Oh, yeah.
Dancing. And what did you call it? Pop-up dance?
What's that?
When you were saying like the pop-up art or the drop-in.
Plop.
Plop.
Plop. Plop art is a sculpture that that was made very unconsequential. You know, I want to come up with these big words, but I can't even pronounce them.
Too much reading.
Unconsequential. Yeah. To the space, right? So you make a sculpture and it has nothing to do with the space, you don't care about the space, and you just plop it there, and that's public art. And so what is public about it? And there were situations, even with Richard Serra, that people hated a sculpture because they thought it was dark, dominant, you know, destructive to the space, all kinds of things. So in that sense, it's public art, but the public is not really engaging with it. The environment is not engaging with it. And you know, maybe it wants to say something radical that people aren't prepared to deal with, which art does. But the idea of plop art is that it's not considering. Irwin has a very nice steps into what is site-specific, and he calls his most engaging form with the environment is conditional art, he calls it. I could pull it out from the book, but there's 4 different levels, and one of them is more like plop art, or it's more like a piece of sculpture that's just put in an environment. And then there's, I think, next is environment considered, then it's site specific, and then it's site conditioned. And the site conditioned is where everything about it is informed by the site. There's almost no intervention, or the intervention is so much of the space that it that it only just really complements it in a way. I mean, I should pull out eventually. Maybe when we're in the workshop, we can discuss these distinctions. But I think those are interesting because they give you a kind of a more thorough consideration for how you're interacting with this site and to what degree, and how immersive your work is with the site. So the reason why I was asking people, dancers, artists, to stop dancing was because I was feeling that a lot of time it was very involved with a dance process that comes from a culture and a practice that happens in the theater and in the studio, but that didn't really belong to the site in a more, you know, deeper inquiry or process that really considered what, or at least I don't want to judge it, but I wanted to push that further. And I think that, I mean, there's a lot of work that's been done site-specifically in dance and in theater also, but I think that we can develop this practice further. I think that there isn't enough questioning around, and I'm thinking that more really kind of generally in terms of a form that we can develop and that we can work on without taking for granted the way we interact with the space so much, or thinking that we have to make content. I think that that's the, you know, I say that dance and theater and performing arts are involved in craft because they do craft movement and text and in a very, and that's where the art is. And conceptual art or visual art is really involved in concept and meanings, and it's usually less involved in craft. In fact, it sort of negates craft. And I think that we, in our craftiness, also negate concept in a way. So I think it's interesting to look at these contrasts between these forms and these approaches in this way, because it helps us understand that we want to make content so much, and we believe that this is where it is, that this is where the art lies, inside this craftiness of the details, and it can be, if the craft is really explored and developed. But then what kind of context does that want to exist in versus so that it can be, you know, the most enjoyed or brought to its full essence. So the working with the space, it really starts with the listening. It's a dialogue with that space, and it's a listening, and it's an ability also to see that space differently and to understand, you know, on a bigger level, it's sort of about understanding what is the role of human in the universe. I mean, it's like when you put humans in a certain space and you're trying to create this dialogue with the environment, you know, ultimately you're asking that question, I think. And it can be boiled down to something much more cultural or much more intimate, or are much more immediate, but it is about what are humans doing here and what's their role on this, you could say on this planet, but I say think of it larger. So what does it mean when you have a human in relation to a tree? I mean, there's a lot there to consider. The tree is not moving, the person is moving, the tree is there for 300 years, and the person is only there for 100 years, and maybe the tree is protecting the person. There's so many things that you could consider just with a tree and a person. So when you're looking at this whole environment, what is this dialogue? And so if you start just gesticulating and making all this movement,
Like
you're not
Italians do.
right?
Like Italians do.
I think she's referring to dancing.
I know.
But that's a kind of dancing, you know. But I mean, you know, it's more interesting perhaps to talk to the tree and be in a conversation with the elements that you're dealing with, rather than ignoring this environment and starting to make something that. And so in the end, with this process, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have movement and you're not going to have, but there might be something else that come out that will initiate your process of generating movement.
Don't choreograph a phrase that you love and then stick it in a field of lilies.
Wait, say that again?
Don't choreograph a movement phrase that you love and then stick it in a field of lilies or wheat.
Right.
Yeah, and
Yeah, that was the idea.
I look forward to, during the workshop, going deeper into these 4 levels and understanding more about, you know, I guess plot art would be the thing that we're trying to avoid, unless it's part of our intention, I guess. I mean, you could make a piece about that, but, you know, looking at each of those levels and wondering, is the goal to make work that is sight conditioned? And, you know, is it a spectrum, like one is bad and one is good? You know, not to be that like simplistic about it, but in terms of what we're trying to go for in dance film in general, how to make it more meaningful. Do you think it is about trying to make work that's more about being sight conditioned, or is it about being aware of the kind of work that you're doing?
I think it's probably more to be aware and to be conscious of the range of possibilities and to learn to listen to the environment in general. I think it you know, with film also, it would be one thing if we were doing, you know, just site-specific pieces, but with the film aspect, there's a whole other world of layers that come into play. So perhaps the moment where you get more narrative about something and the space becomes much more of a background or more symbolic of a certain meaning or context, like, you know, there was some of these films that happened in a laundromat or the streets, I mean the trains, so I think that film thinks more in terms of location. In the location is a visual world that your character is in. It's like in a dream when you define, sometimes in a dream nothing is really happening other than you're defining the environment that you're in, and that is the content, that is the story, or that is the atmosphere, that is what is happening, really. But it's just a description of the environment. So I think that in a way, the film process deals with location, and a lot of times differently in that sense. It becomes a vehicle, you know, for the story, where you find yourself in this kitchen. It's the symbol of, you know, kitchen, and the choice of using a kitchen for a certain scene might have to do with femininity and might have to do with sensuality and cooking, and so
It's loaded.
so I think that it brings up these other layers. I think that when we try to work site specifically, and the other thing to consider is that dance is also operating in a very abstract level compared to the very narrative text kind of work that theater and literature and film are really about stories. And so I think we're hovering into these different realms, and there's so much to explore there. It's site specific, yes, but it's not totally, because it's a film. So it's not so much about just the perception of the space. Like, I think that Irwin doesn't really have any interest in film because it's representational, and it doesn't just engage with. He's interested in perception, like just literally the senses and the moment of being in a certain environment. And that's different from this constructed environment and representation that film deals
Wouldn't you
with.
say that sometimes that's what people are after in making film? That they're after this, I think a lot of times dancers will be like, oh, by having, by doing a film, I'm able to really bring the person into that space, and, with a close-up or a choice of shot, you can really, bring it in, like, bring it back in there. But also,
Yeah,
I just
I'm
want to...
always feeling the opposite. I'm always feeling like there's a loss. I'm always feeling that when something is captured on film, the actual atmosphere that I did feel when I was present in the space cannot really come through, and that I have to add other things, and that can be camera movement, or to really try to get the sensuality into the picture. It's just because it's a two-dimensional medium at the end of the day. You have the film, and it's not, you cannot touch it, and you're not there. It's representational. It's not the thing.
Well, and another thing you said was, it's a visual medium, and then you said, and we also said that you listen to the space. So then I just wanted to bring up this question about sound, which also fits into what you're saying now, because you're talking about adding camera movement or other aspects to help bring out that tangibility and the presence of the space. So how does sound play into that?
Yeah, I mean, the sound is like a huge aspect. I was thinking, this book that you were mentioning earlier, he talks a lot about synesthesia, right? Which is the different senses working together to understand something. So if you're in a space and you see something, like if I was in this space now and there was completely silent, I didn't hear the cars outside, I didn't hear all these, it would be very, very strange, right? And that's, Paolo, you said that, I think, before too. But we understand, we see also by hearing. So that's what synesthesia is that you need more than one sense to understand the environment that you're in. So it's sound is interesting in its very discrete kind of way, I think, because it's so innocuous to us. We tend to take a lot of sound ambience for granted. I mean, until it bothers us, if there's some really loud, unbearable sound. And it's like smells, huh? It's like smells. It's something that we think, it doesn't really matter that much, does it? Except when apparently you choose your lover based on their smell and their voice. if you can't like someone's voice and someone's smell, you probably can't live with them. So, it's interesting that those are the senses that seem to be the less in the foreground, but that are the most deeper for us.
Yeah.
It is.
Paolo, do you have some thoughts on this?
It is very subliminal, I think. Although we have to distinguish between sound and music. With music, we are able to create a direct connection. Music can give us the key to read a scene from a movie. So in a few seconds, we can have two silhouettes moving, dancing, and we can have a romantic music. And the music gave us the idea and how we should read that scene. But if on the same scene we put like a horror music, like tension and with violence, and we can read the same sequence as if one of the two person is trying to kill the other one. So
What if it's sound? What if it's just a sound environment?
sound experts say if you want to put audience in an uncomfortable position, just cut the music, just use the sound, because we miss references. We don't know how to read it.
Sorry.
No, you can.
No, I was going to ask you, would you say that's a very cinematic, like film industry-based point of view, or do you think that's
No, I think this is almost an animal intellectual reaction. It's really with music we are able to. Music is a language that we know we know pretty well. We are always exposed to music, while we're not very exposed to sound, to listen to sound, and to open our ears. And where are we? What are we? What are one of the first experiments we will do for the workshop is really go through the city and listen. Nature has its own rhythm that changes. In the morning it's very active, while at midday is completely different. So when using these two tools that you have at your disposal, amongst all the other tools languages that you use to realize a movie, it is very useful and dangerous at the same time. So you need to choose scene by scene and sequence by sequence. What do I want to obtain? Do I really need music? Because sometimes music is the cheapest solution. Not cheapest economically speaking, but it's like
Easy.
Yeah, it's the easiest thing you can do. But if you start your dialogue with a sound expert, he or she can give you an idea about using different kind of things and sounds that may help your film in a better way.
Well, one thing you said that I think is really important, and I'm sure that Noemie will have something to say about this too, is because you said, well, we're not used to sound, but in a way, we are very used to sound, but we're just not aware. So
we're not aware.
What we're talking about is awareness, because I might not know when I hear the sound environment that you create for early morning versus night. I might just listen to the two and say, well, this one's night and this one's morning, or this one makes me feel calm, like the day is ending. And I might not know why, but instinctively I probably know that. We have a reaction to sound even without being aware. So I think, and the same goes when you're composing camera movements and making choices with a camera, how you hold it, whether it's held or still or has a voyeuristic approach or has a removed approach, like all these very emotional and things we're not used to noticing, but they affect us psychologically and emotionally. That's what we're really interested in, building awareness, and what are the tools that we use for this awareness as we continue to make dance film, because talking about the craft, we want to be able to craft this experience as an artist, and we have to kind of start building our awareness. And I guess this is kind of like wrap-up kind of moment, because it really is about bringing all these things together. And whether you're making film as a professional or you're putting yourself in a workshop position, situation, so you can investigate and have a mentor kind of push you in your work, it's about building awareness and taking on these knowledge bases from film and from movement, from visual arts and from performance art and from sound design and from music composition, and building our tool set for the craft and then how to use that. So maybe a final comment, sorry, I'll just let this be my last thing, is that final comment from maybe both of you about this balance between awareness and kind of what it is that you would want your collaborators or students or colleagues to know, to think about, to have the last final thought that has to do with this, this last point.
Yeah. I think that it is. It was Noemie said that there is the dance film. There is a lot to explore still in the dance film, and there is a lot to explore in the sound field as well. And just think about what if we sum these two things, what we can do. And usually, the thing that brought me to start working on dance film is that I felt that there is a lot of space, there is a lot of energy that we can build together if we only start thinking about sound and movement in pre-production as well, and leaving moments for the sound sometimes that can really give you important cut or cues as well. And so there is the interaction between sound and movement is so, I think, exciting, and I can't wait to start exploring it this summer again with the new students. Not students probably, but
our participants. We have some
participants.
Some very interesting people coming this summer. Noémie?
Well, I agree with what you're saying, Paolo, and I think that one of the things that did draw me to work on this with you guys was particularly this idea that sound can come earlier in the process, and that it can really shape narrative, spaces, movement, everything. And I think as an experiment, I think it's very interesting because sound is maybe something that we take for granted. It's not that we're not aware of it. I mean, we take it for granted a lot. And it's interesting because sound is the real abstraction to me, in terms of the different senses and the different art forms that deal with the different senses. If you'd say dance is kinesthetics, and visual art is visual, and music is sound, and so on. I think that that no matter how abstract contemporary art and visual art wants to be, it's very concrete because it's objects. But sound is, to me, the summit of abstraction in that sense. And I think that I think we can create, and I think that Paolo demonstrated that last year, and I think we can continue to develop that. But you can really affect every aspect of the spectrum with the sound. And so I think that bringing that into the foreground and working from sound into movement, space, film, I think that is a very interesting exercise to undertake. And I think that there is a point at which you can completely change your perception of space, completely change your perception of movement, and I think we should go for that and try that with sound.
Okay, let's try it.
Well, yeah, we can push it even more this year. Noemie, thank you so much for joining us this morning,
Yeah, you're welcome.
evening/afternoon. Yeah, I can't wait for the summer. I think it's going to be different from last year and have its own energies and its own, nature. But I think that I really do look forward to seeing you again and to witnessing the experience of everyone else as they make films. And I'm
Yeah.
happy that I had a recent workshop myself because it's really hard to not make a film myself. It's such an inspiring and rich environment. But I'm I'm really excited about it, and to have you as well, Paolo, joining us again. And I hope this year we push sound, as Noemie just said very beautifully now, to really bring it to the foreground in the pre-production and the conceptualization, and let it really play a prominent role in that.
Are there any questions from the audience? I'm curious to know. But
I've had some people message me, and I don't know if everyone who wanted to log in was able to. So it could be
okay.
that we share the recording, and
Yep.
I think this is an important part of our process, the three of us, as we kind of brainstorm and think about what will happen this summer and how to, offer to the whole dance film community, ideas about how to teach and facilitate and enable people to go deeper, which is really what Noemie did last summer, which was really powerful. It wasn't just a workshop or an experience where you were like, okay, go have fun, make a film, I'm here. It was, no, I'm going to really push you to make a film that's like making you really look at who you are as an artist and why you're doing it. And I feel like everyone went deeper because of it. So I think that's a really important thing to offer. Yeah, so.
Okay.
Unique.
We have a question, Renata, actually.
Oh, great.
Okay, I'll read it. Hello, my name is Luca. I'm a programmer and very passionate about 3D CG. Usually CG is associated with big blockbuster movies, so I would like to ask Noemie, do you think CG will be of any help to dance film? And if so, what will be a good way to use it? Computer graphics.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's another really fantastic line of exploration, obviously, to make what's not possible physically possible in various ways, and perhaps even the interactive aspect of it, if you think of video games and so on. So I think, but I think it's true though that the times that I've worked with it and I've been involved in it, it was always in big budget commercials that could really deal with it. And it's not just the labor involved, but it's equipment, it's all kinds of stuff. And it is true that, again, in the impoverishment reality of dance, it's a difficult mix. But I think some people are doing it. And, there becomes specific research project or exploration, and there's so many avenues with technology that are interesting. But I mean, I think I support this sort of approach, and I think also what's important in that approach is to think about not what can we do with the technology, but what do we want to do, period. Because a lot of times what ends up happening is that it's an exploration of the technology for the technology's sake more so than an expansion of the art form. And this is something that may happen naturally when the blend of these forms are new, because we don't know what to do with them and we don't know how they're useful yet, and so on. But I'm interested in when an artist is looking to expand its possibilities, and then that artist goes and gets the tools that is needed to do that, rather than what can we do with this thing, and then trying to, because then what happens is the technology becomes visible. And I think that any art that's successful is practically invisible. meaning that you don't see that the dance is dance, that you don't see that, you're not aware that the film is a film. When you're really captured by a film, you're in the story, you're in the characters, you're inside a world, you're not thinking that you're looking at a film. So that's what I mean by the medium has become invisible.
I absolutely agree with you, and
Yeah, love that.
using, I mean, I think we can say using technology to serve the story, to serve the narrative, to serve the movement, to help more than I think just use it to explore the technology, as you said. So thanks,
we
Luca.
have
It would be
people,
great if Luca joined us and we could work on
yeah,
something.
yeah, I was gonna say if there's a way that he can join us in Virginia this summer, I think that there would be some people very interested to experiment with him. And you know, even still, at the very least, please join the Experimental Film Virginia Facebook page where you can post who you are, and if you are interested in working, there's definitely dance filmmakers in Europe, in Italy, all over the world who would probably be very interested in experimenting with you. So join our Facebook page and contact us, and or you know, at least I can speak for myself, and I'll try and introduce you and hook you up. So
Yep. Okay. So I think we should stop our session now. Can end our session now.
Okay.
Renata?
yeah, we said we'd do a good hour conversation, and we've done just a little bit over. I mean, yeah, I think we're touching some very interesting topics, and it's always, yeah, it's good to kind of document this and keep it in our minds. Maybe we can pick up again and continue this conversation. Most definitely we will during the workshop, but even in the future with Noemie, we'll see if we can do this again sometime. I know that people are very interested to hear, you know, your thoughts and your background. So thank you, and thank you, Paolo.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
See you soon.
Okay, well, we can log out of our session, and then we can just quickly touch base with each other.
Yeah, that would be great.
Really.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
All right.
Bye.